Welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast. I am your host, Lisa Hillier, and today I have Sena Maria on the show with me. And Sena Maria supports women to embrace a nourished, resilient, and radiantly healthy state. As a Re-Mineralizer and Wellness Explorer, she uses mineral nutritional balancing to rebuild our mineral heritage and help us return to the simple, natural joy of being alive. She shares thought-provoking content drops about plant medicine, minerals, and holistic healing on Instagram at Sena__Maria, and hosts her signature Radiantly Nourished Mineral Balancing membership, and that includes one-to-one re-mineralization packages using hair tissue mineral analysis. And she is the founder of senamaria.com. And this is such a fascinating episode. I learned so much on this episode, and it was such a pleasure having this conversation with Sena. It's all around health, minerals, coming into balance, and really coming into a state where you can fully thrive in your life. We talk a lot about meat and butter, raw milk, all the good stuff that our bodies need, and where you might be deficient in minerals. And please share this conversation with any woman that you know that might be struggling with her physical health, her mental health. It is really helpful to listen to others' stories and to find ways to come into a really optimal state. So yes, I love this conversation and can't wait to dive in. If you feel called to support the podcast, to be in reciprocity with the podcast, I am so grateful. It's my absolute pleasure being here with you guys every week. And so please give us a 5-star rating, write us a review, share with all your friends. There are affiliate links in the show notes of products that I fully stand by. Castor oil packs by Queen of the Thrones are my go-to and have significantly shifted my health. So yeah, definitely check it out. In the show notes, there's a discount code, Lisa Hillier 10, and I receive a small commission every time that you purchase through my link. It makes no difference to you except you receive a sweet little discount, and I receive a sweet little commission, which helps to support the podcast and get these shows out to you each and every week. And so I'm so grateful. So grateful. And now let's dive in with Sena Maria. Okay, welcome to the podcast, Sena. And our paths crossed on Instagram. And sometimes I like to add in where I came across my guest. And I saw a meme that said, maybe you need a steak instead of another plant medicine ceremony. And I was just like, yes. So we'll dive into that a little bit more, but welcome to the show. And to start, what has been your journey that has led you to the work that you're offering the world today?
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. My journey. So I would say that I grew up with like a habit of malnourishment. Like I just didn't really eat enough or well, not necessarily because like my parents didn't do a good job, but yeah, I was always a really picky eater. And and then I got really into drinking at a young age, drinking alcohol, partying, did that for 10 years, was on birth control for 10 years. Kind of like the classic cocktail, I think, for unfortunately a lot of like American women that then we're paying for in our late 20s, early 30s. Around when I was 25, I stopped taking birth control. I got into yoga, kind of expanded spiritually, started to connect with spirituality in new ways. And then not long after that, I got into the plant medicine world and was in a deep relationship with ceremonial cacao, kind of experienced a lot of heart healing and anxiety, healing from that medicine. And I think really like a deep part of that whole phase for me was the healing of being in like a circle with other people and being kind of in a ceremonial space or like a community space that felt really ancient and something that I hadn't experienced before. So then I worked with some of the more master plant medicines like ayahuasca. I did a lot of work with San Pedro cactus. Then I got really into microdosing psilocybin mushrooms. And I can kind of track, if I look back at the timeline, I can track like as I was deepening into that realm, which not only is it, taking these powerful substances, but also there tends to be a level of fasting or, dieta, like diets where you're, limiting your sodium intake. It's a lot of emphasis on like plant-based diets. So, I feel like I was kind of depleted on a nourishment level while working with these stronger medicines. And I can track that my symptoms started to get worse as I started to continue to work with those psychedelics. And I eventually got to a point where I was essentially like depending on microdosing to function, to like do my business. I was at a time where before any sort of podcast like this or any sort of offering I would do, I like would have a big cup of cacao and a microdose. Like I had to kind of get that support from outside of myself. And about 2 years ago, my health it got to a point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. I developed severe histamine intolerance, which for anyone that's not familiar, that is basically being allergic to like anything and everything. I was hyper reactive, I had a very low capacity for stress. If I ate a certain food, it would set me off and I would get hives or severe brain fog or severe fatigue. My hormones were super out of whack. So I would have like uncontrollable crying spells before my period started. Like, I mean, I could go on and on, but I basically kind of crashed and became like a couch potato. That was kind of what I had to do. And I literally physically could not consume cacao. I couldn't microdose. I basically pushed my body to the point where it stopped. It just was like, you literally cannot do this anymore. I somehow discovered some pro-metabolic nutritionists, which are focused on an animal-based diet for supporting hormones, supporting thyroid, supporting adrenals, like overall supporting metabolic function. And then I won an HTMA test and a giveaway, a hair tissue mineral analysis, on Instagram. And when I got my results, I hadn't even talked to the practitioner. I just sent her a list of my top 5 symptoms and she sent me a recorded video back. It was like 30 minutes. It wasn't even super long. And I was blown away by how validated I felt and how seen I felt from just what she could see from my mineral levels in my body. She could see that I likely had a tendency to socially withdraw because my magnesium levels were really low. I may be experiencing like kind of like inexplicable fear because my potassium was super low. My adrenals were very sluggish. My thyroid was very sluggish, which explains the histamine intolerance. So that really started my journey with minerals. I did keto, I did genetic testing, I took all the supplements that I saw on the internet, like I had bounced around from a lot of different things to try and heal. And once I kind of discovered minerals, I was like, oh, okay, this makes so much sense. And so I really learned how to feed myself. One of the blessings of histamine intolerance was that like the fresher the food, the better. And so I literally started to cook all my meals fresh 3 times a day. And that's, that was a really important like habit forming for me to just learn how to actually nourish myself 3 times a day, learn how to eat enough protein. Yeah. And so, fast forward, I've now completed 4 different HTMA trainings and, feel like I'm in a place where I'm able to kind of support and serve others. Like my healing journey has gotten me to a place where I have enough vitality to be back in the world and be engaged. And there's a whole nother component about like relationship and like that level, like how that impacted my stress levels that we can talk about if you want. But yeah, I'll leave it up there because that's a lot.
We'll come back to that
Yeah.
relationship and stress for sure. What's your relationship with plant medicine like now? Is it just Qigong, like out of your life?
I mean, sort of. I mean, yeah, like as far as like, do I engage in it or partake in it? Almost never. Not any big ceremony experience for years now. I have a deep, deep level of gratitude and respect because I fully believe that like my first ceremonies, I would not be kind of where I am today without those. But my approach now is like, I would potentially be open to it if I felt very clear and called to it and felt very solid in my, foundational metabolic health. But I am not viewing it as the thing that's going to bring me more stability or balance or fix me. It's very much would be like a spiritual calling. And um, yeah, so it's definitely not a big part of my life.
Yeah, I think that can happen a lot in the plant medicine realms from my experience, where you're doing it or I've done it to fix something.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of, friends and ex-colleagues and stuff, plant medicine journey after journey after journey after
Mm-hmm.
journey, and they're missing the root of what actually needs to be addressed. And that was very much my experience with it.
Yeah.
So, hair tissue analysis, I have never heard of this before.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you give us kind of like a synopsis of what happens? Is it literally like you give somebody a piece of hair?
Yeah.
And
Yep. So it's a non-invasive cellular biopsy. We can actually see what's going on inside your cells without taking an actual biopsy of your skin. And so we have various paths of elimination. So urine, bowel movements, sweat, and hair. Those are how our body will eliminate things. And so
I've never thought of hair as an
uh-huh.
elimination.
Yep.
That's so
Yeah. It's a
interesting.
very slow growing medium. So on a hair test, we take about an inch closest to the scalp, an inch of hair. It kind of looks like the amount of a tablespoon. And you want to go like from the back, kind of like the nape of your neck, and get a couple different spots. And they burn it. You send it into a lab, they burn it, and they measure the mineral and metal content in the ash. And you can see an average of the last 3 months of minerals and metals being excreted into your hair. So it is a really cool, it's really unique in that way because, blood labs are a snapshot in time. Whereas on a hair test, you can really I think hair tests are really impactful from a preventative standpoint where you can see way before anything would show on blood how your thyroid might be functioning, how your adrenals are functioning. So from that information, there's a lineage of hair testing called mineral nutritional balancing that was founded by Dr. Paul Eck in the 70s, 80s. And he analyzed hundreds of thousands of hair tests and discerned all these different patterns and all these different ratios. So for example, the calcium to potassium ratio, we look at the level of calcium excreted into your hair compared to the level or in relation to the level of potassium. And that will show us how much thyroid hormone is able to access your cells. So how permeable are your cells to receive thyroid hormone? So calcium, right? Calcium calcifies, it hardens, it forms our bones, our teeth, our nerves, or it's used in our nerves. And so if we have an imbalance where we have way too much calcium being excreted into the hair, meaning calcium is being pulled from where it should be, it's being pulled and, due to usually a stress response in the body, it will be pulled and kind of put into different areas in the body. Then we're going to have high levels of calcium in relation to potassium, and that calcium makes the cells less permeable to receive the thyroid hormone. So this is just one example where on blood, many women come to me and they're like, my thyroid levels on blood are always normal, but I know something's going on. And blood, in the blood, we can see how much of the hormone is being produced by the body, how well is that converting in the liver. We get good information, but if that hormone is not able to actually get into your cells, then the thyroid's going to have some issues. Yeah. So that's just kind of one example of what you can see.
Okay. So with, I'll use myself as an example, but I was skipping periods in my late 30s and I'm like, something's like off. I was also vegan at the time. And so I went into my doctor and she's like, no, your hormones are completely fine. You're not perimenopause or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 41, so that was my late 30s. And then at 41, I went into full blown menopause. And there was clearly something going on with my hormones.
Yep.
But my doctor wasn't seeing it in my blood. So would you have been able to see it with my hair?
Yeah, I would think so.
And progesterone? Okay.
You can see, we see the cellular effect of a lot of different hormones. So we would see how well thyroid is critical for our hormonal system, right? We could see level of copper biounavailable or copper, like biomarkers for copper toxicity in the system, and copper is related to estrogen in the body. So we could see adrenal function. We can see the cellular effect of aldosterone and cortisol, which, if our adrenals are super depleted, that's going to impact digestion. That's going to impact thyroid. That's going to increase biounavailable copper in the system. There's so many cascading effects. And so, the view, it's not as in depth as, let's say, like a Dutch test where you're getting progesterone levels, estrogen levels, testosterone levels, every day for a month. Like, we're not going to see that level of granularity with an HTMA, but we are going to see like how much energy is your body able to produce, how is your metabolism functioning overall, and is there some level of heavy metal toxicity that is leading to symptoms. And what you just mentioned, like that's a symptom, losing your menses or having irregular menses, that's a symptom that is showing that something, your body is not like operating at full efficiency, full vitality. And so I think for the HTMA, it's a more like whole system look at what's happening. And as we start to balance minerals, support adrenal, thyroid, liver function, support elimination of metals, metabolism improves, and then symptoms will start to kind of fade away.
Interesting. So what are the metals that you see with most people that their body is secreting? Mm-hmm. And then what are the minerals that you're going to see, and which ones are people most deficient in?
Yeah. So metals, the unfortunate reality is that we all have metal toxicity in this day and age. Metals don't break down in the body. Their half-lives are so long that they outlast how long we live. And we are all exposed in the air, in the water, in the soil. They're passed now, now we're generations deep of like receiving them from our mothers. And so I don't like to come from a fear-based approach at all. I don't really talk about metals too much because I think there's an over focus on like detoxing and chelating and we have to get the bad things out. And you know, we metals are a big contributor, I believe, to so much of the decline in our health as a society. And so yeah, so to answer your question, you know, pretty much all of them is we all have levels of them. And what we can see on a test is if someone is a poor eliminator, meaning they're not eliminating a lot of a metal, that means that their body is holding on to it. Because, for example, lead and cadmium can replace calcium in enzyme receptor sites. It mimics calcium. So if someone's depleted in calcium, the body will hold on to lead or cadmium, and it acts as kind of a backup system. It's like a spare tire. Not ideal. You can't go full capacity. You definitely don't want that long term, but it's better than having a completely empty receptor site. And so this approach, mineral nutritional balancing, is literally giving the body the preferred minerals. The body will always choose that calcium if it has it available. So as it chooses the calcium, it will then start to eliminate the metals.
Okay. So are there ways that you do recommend to eliminate the metals or like,
yeah, so it's mineral nutritional balancing. By replenishing and rebalancing our minerals, we are also eliminating heavy metals. It's one and the same. The difference with like this approach versus a chelation approach, like a heavy metal chelation therapy, is that this approach is slower and we allow the body to, like, we trust the body to eliminate the metals in its own order, in its own timing, because it's a big deal. These metals are toxic. So a chelation approach like forces metals out of the system along with other important minerals.
okay. Can you elaborate on chelation? I've just never heard that term.
Yes.
Before.
Yeah. It's an approach where you take chelating agents. It's essentially taking some sort of substance or supplement kind of thing to grab onto metals, heavy metals in the body, but it does it in a very forceful way. I'm not an expert in it by any means. I've never done it, but I just know that it's like kind of like a all at once. We're going to do a couple chelation therapies or like sessions, and then you're trying to get all the metals out, and it's just very, very hard on the body.
Okay. So what are the minerals that our body needs?
Mm-hmm.
Which ones are most people deficient in?
Yeah. So like 80% of the test focuses on the first 4 macro minerals, which are calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. So what's happening with those 4 is going to inform what's happening with the rest of the minerals. So other minerals we look at would be iron, copper, manganese, zinc, selenium, chromium, phosphorus. I think that's the main ones. But we look at the levels of calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, and we also look at them in relation to each other. So, for example, the vitality ratio, it's the most important ratio of the test. It's looking at our sodium to potassium, because those are so important for, it's also called the life or death ratio. You know, those are important. Potassium is inside the cell, sodium is outside the cell. They're responsible for moving minerals and nutrients around the body and also getting them in and out of cells. And so electrical charge and communication between cells is critically dependent on the balance between those two. And those two also point to how our adrenals are doing. And so there are many different patterns we can see on the test. Many people have adrenal exhaustion where sodium and potassium levels are very low. There's a lot more detail I could go into with that, but I'll let you take me from there.
Okay. So sodium and potassium, where adrenal levels are really low. And just speaking to menopause, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm just familiar with that because I abruptly went into it at a
Right.
fairly young age.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I understand, if your adrenals are low, you haven't built up the reserves so that when your hormones do decrease naturally,
Mm-hmm.
because we're all going to go through menopause at some point, there's no reserves for when the estrogen and progesterone decline.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when like breakdowns, nervous break, all that kind of stuff can come in.
Yep.
So
Yep.
adrenals are pretty important.
They're super important. The other thing I also just want to say is that when I talk about sodium potassium levels, I'm not just talking about like how much sodium potassium do you take in your diet. Sodium's correlated with the cellular effect of aldosterone. Potassium's correlated with the cellular effect of cortisol. So when I'm looking at sodium potassium levels and ratios, I'm not just going to say, hey, add salt to your water. That actually doesn't move the needle on the sodium level. We actually need to replenish your adrenals. We need to look at lifestyle. We need to look at various supplementation approaches, various nutrition approaches to make sure you're not, you know, getting hangry and ignoring your hunger cues, which kicks in your stress hormones. I mean, there's many, we are very dependent on our adrenals in this day and age, which is why so many people are, burned out. But like you said, everything like our adrenals are also critically important for hydrochloric acid production, which is our stomach acid. So when our digestion goes out of whack, we need to look at adrenals.
Right.
Yeah, they're super important.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on fasting?
Not a fan.
Okay. I've just heard so many mixed reviews, and I know
Mm-hmm.
so many women are doing it,
Mm-hmm.
one for spiritual reasons and then
Right.
also for weight gain, the whole like fast like a girl. I've never read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And also for menopause.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I've never done it myself.
Yeah.
I get I wake up and I have to eat within half an hour of waking up, otherwise I'm hangry.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, what's
Which
your
is
thoughts
that's a
on?
sign of a strong metabolism right there. That's a good thing to be hungry upon waking. I think fasting, fasting and plant medicines, like we need to look, 300, 400, 1,000 years ago, our mineral stores in our bodies were very different. The levels of minerals we were getting from our soil, from our food, and the animals that ate like much more nutrient density. Um, and we also had much less levels of metal toxicity and other toxicities. We didn't have prescription medication, on and on. So, yes, plant medicines have been around forever. Fasting has been around forever. But we're in a different state. And I would argue we are in a more fragile state, like collectively now. I would also argue that women are much more sensitive. And if you refer to a lot of like wisdom traditions like Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, Mayan wisdom, cosmologies, like women are kept warm. Tend to be, a little more juicy than we're shown in like modern aesthetics of how women should look today. Um, they're tending the hearth. They're holding it down on the nutrition perspective.
What does
And
juicy mean in this context? Sorry, love.
like have a little more plump, a little more like
Mm.
fertility, like they look fertile and radiant, and like they have some hips to hold on to. Like not
Yeah. I used to be an interior designer, and
mm,
one of the men in my office was from the Philippines.
mm-hmm.
And so when clients would come in, he'd be like, "Oh, you look so great. You've gained weight."
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Like, don't say that to any woman, like you've gained weight. But in his culture,
Yeah,
it's a good thing when you've gained weight
absolutely.
because it means you're abundant and
Yes.
wealthy. Yeah.
Yes.
And in Africa
Yes.
too,
Yeah.
weight is a sign of
Of health.
goodness, health,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
not here.
Not here. And I think there's a balance with it, but um I kind of lost my train of thought. What were we talking
I don't know. We were
about?
talking about
Things.
juicy women need to be kept
Oh,
warm
fasting,
and
fasting. Yeah.
fasting. Yes, yes, yes.
So, yeah. And so, the funny thing about fasting is that when we're fasting, our body needs fuel from somewhere. So it's either going to be from our food or it's going to kick on our adrenals and we're going to be running off of stress hormones. It feels really good running off of stress hormones. We feel uplifted. We feel like jazzed. It feels good. And so that is why, so many women are like, I feel great. I feel so good. I don't feel hungry. I feel energy. It's like, I did that. I did keto for 3 months and ran off of stress hormones because I wasn't eating carbs and destroyed my metabolism. But I felt that sense of, what it feels like to basically be high on your own stress hormones. But that's a survival mechanism. Like, that's not how we're supposed to be operating long term. And a lot of the talk on fasting comes from men, Huberman studies done on men, which I think are much more able. They're built much differently. Their hormonal systems are much different than women's. And so they're able to do that. They can sustain that longer than women. I don't necessarily think it's good for them long term either. But with women, it's like, I feel it's inevitable that there will be a crash moment. There's going to be a crash and burn where your adrenals are not going to be able to produce that level of stress hormones for an extended period of time. And when that happens, then we see the sodium level drop, we see the potassium level drop. We go into something called sympathetic dominance when our potassium is really low, and it shows that we have been running in a chronic state of sympathetic nervous system dominance, and we're burned out.
Yeah. Can you look at someone's hair and be able to tell? Like, could you look at a woman's hair and be like, oh, she's deficient?
You mean just like
And
your hair right now, like I'm seeing on
yeah,
camera?
yeah.
You can see like nails, skin, hair, like luster. There are definitely like signs of metabolic health or not. Like if someone's hair is really thinning, or
Right.
not very lustrous, or the nails have ridges in them, or white spots, or teeth stuff. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not
Okay.
trained in that, but I think I can kind of usually get a little bit of a sense.
Okay. What
Mm-hmm.
does the ridges and nails mean?
Um, I forget the specifics, but it's some sort of mineral deficiency. It might be
Okay,
related to
I have
zinc.
ridges. Okay.
We'll have to follow
I've
up on that
always
one.
had them. Yeah. So weird.
Yeah.
Okay, so potassium and sodium. What are the supplements? Can you give a little bit of a synopsis of what people can do to,
Mhm.
raise their potassium and sodium?
Yeah. So, well, my approach, it's very bio individual. So there's no, you could have really low levels of sodium potassium. You could have really high levels of sodium potassium. That's going to shift what supplements I would recommend. Um, so what, that's this approach is very much based on the data of what your specific cells are saying. What we don't do, what some HTMA practitioners do, is a replacement theory. So they'll look at your sodium level, say your sodium's low, you should add salt to your waters, you should take a bunch of electrolyte mixes or whatever. That Dr. Eck found doesn't work. Like, minerals are all part of a holistic, interrelated system. And so there are synergisms and antagonisms, meaning increasing one level of a mineral can decrease like another mineral. So increasing zinc will decrease sodium. And so he formulated this line of supplements that I work with that is designed based on HTMA patterns. So if your vitality ratio, that sodium to potassium ratio, is high, I'm going to give you zinc to try and lower that sodium ratio, along with a whole host of other minerals that are dosed in like this kind of perfect formulation that has the right doses and cofactors. So there's so many pieces. It's quite complex. I don't even, fully understand how we formulated all of these yet, because it's like a level of understanding of how the minerals interact with each other that is very deep and scientific.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important that it's like we can kind of give a overview,
Mm-hmm.
but your each person's unique
Yes.
range and numbers are going to be very different. So depletion in potassium and sodium, so that's fair to say your adrenals are going
Mm-hmm.
to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke to fear as a symptom.
Mm-hmm.
What mineral would that be deficient?
Potassium.
Potassium. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
can tell a story about that really quick if you want.
Yeah.
Um, so I used to have this really bizarre, unfounded fear. I mean, it could be, I don't know, it could be some sort of past life thing. I don't know, but I would get really afraid of being at home alone at night. We're like to the point one time I was home alone. This is so embarrassing to even share, but I was home alone at my boyfriend's parents' house at the time, and I ended up calling the police because I convinced myself that someone was in like the back room. There wasn't someone there. The police came, like, but it was that level of like I would get so afraid, and I would convince myself. It was just kind of wild. And literally since I started tending to my minerals and balancing my minerals, like I feel so solid. Like I do not, that fear is not present at all.
That's encouraging because I know for myself, like I can attest to having completely irrational thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
where you're just like, where, like,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of listeners can probably resonate with that, where we convince ourselves of something that is completely not truth. And just to know that
Mm-hmm.
there's a solution to
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. That
Mm-hmm.
since, yeah, you're not experiencing it. So
Yeah.
with the other main minerals like magnesium,
Mm-hmm.
how does that deficiency show up in the body?
Yeah. So when talking about with magnesium, it's an interesting one because that's one of the more popular ones. You know, a lot of people supplement magnesium because that's for some reason like in the popular consciousness that we're a lot of us are deficient in magnesium because we don't get enough of it from our food sources, which is true, I believe. But back to the minerals are all interrelated to each other. I don't recommend supplementing magnesium without its cofactor calcium because that ratio of calcium to magnesium determines it shows our glucose sensitivity. It's like how well is our blood sugar able to regulate. It shows other things as well, but if we're supplementing magnesium and our magnesium level is higher than our calcium level, we have an inverse ratio and we can feel really confused. Calcium and magnesium are they tend to rise and fall. They rise and fall together. They need to stay in some level of balance in the body. They're also the brakes. They're the calming minerals along with zinc. But they're the brakes, whereas sodium and potassium are the gas because those adrenals kick on. So, balanced metabolism and health, ideally we want an adaptability where, our body is putting the brakes on and putting the gas on in the right timing, kind of like a tiger in the jungle where it's like sleeping all day and then it like when it's time to hunt it's on and it's really energized. um so magnesium, it's needed for over half of our enzymes in our body. It's very important. Magnesium deficiency can look like many many things. But when we have a very low level of magnesium, it's called a belligerence pattern, where we can be really reactive. It's like we don't have, I describe it both with calcium and magnesium. It's like we're raw to the world. We don't have this
Mm.
like buffer element between us and what's happening around us. And so in a belligerence pattern, it can be, yeah, reactive, have a really hard time focusing, a little, more confrontational. It's very stressful for the body to be in a low magnesium state. It's definitely not where we want to be long term.
Would that correlate with, in the trauma world, there's like the window of tolerance, where you can
Mm-hmm.
handle
Yep.
situations. And then sometimes, like when I was going through menopause, my window of tolerance got very, very, very small. And so then I
Yep.
was out of it. And so would that be similar to what's taking place with a deficiency in magnesium?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's a great way to explain it.
Okay. Are there foods that you recommend, or is it completely supplements that, would bring your magnesium and calcium into an optimal level?
Yeah, I don't go too deep into like you need to eat this specific food for your magnesium. I more focus on why an animal-based diet is important, why dairy is healthy and good for you. It is a really important source of calcium. Um, I focus on kind of encouraging women to eat more and eat enough and eat more protein. Um, I'm trying to kind of unravel this belief that if we eat less, we'll be skinny, because that's not true. The less we eat, the more we'll eventually hold on to more weight around our gut because our body's stressed and it's trying to survive. So a high functioning metabolism is like a woman eating 2,000, 2,500 calories a day, 120 grams of protein. This is all dependent on body type and height and whatever. But, eating a lot and utilizing that energy well, right? Not, storing some, having a healthy amount of fat on the body, but not like fluctuating a ton in weight, but we should be able to utilize the food that we eat. So I really focus, I find that women are so used to these very specific food protocols and restriction protocols that I just I like throw all that out the window. I'm like, you want bacon and like, what's your most delicious breakfast you could imagine eating? Bacon and eggs, steak and eggs, and some hash browns. Use good ingredients, get good quality meat, get good quality butter, get organic potatoes, and enjoy your breakfast. Like, that we've gotten so far from like enjoying our nourishment and trying to like micromanage like so much. And it's, I focus on basics like don't eat carbs on their own. That's going to spike your blood sugar. We need to combine it with proteins and fats. I do pull on a lot of pro-metabolic nutrition approaches, but I also try to keep it really simple for people, just eat good, enjoy it, like eat like nutrient dense foods.
Yeah. I was doing a menopause mastery course, so I am still doing a menopause mastery course.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it was to start tracking what you were eating. And I was so shocked
Mm.
at how little protein I was getting,
Mm.
even though I eat meat
Yeah.
every day.
Mm. Mm.
And it was still like not 100 grams. And I was
How
like,
much was
it was
it? Do
just
you mind
so,
sharing?
it was like 50 grams
Wow.
of protein a day.
Yeah.
And that was like my typical day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. And that was me like making an effort
Mm.
to eat meat.
Yeah.
So I was really shocked that
Yeah.
I was getting half of what I should be, because her recommendation, the guide of that was 100 grams a
Yeah.
day. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh,
I mean,
nowhere near.
it's an epidemic of women not eating enough protein for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting because I mean, I think back to growing up. I mean, my mom did ridiculous diets.
Right.
I've done ridiculous diets
Mm-hmm.
in my life. And there's always been this idea that like red meat is bad and
Mm-hmm.
butter is bad. And
Mm-hmm.
even right now, I'm doing a herbalist course to be a herbalism course to be a herbalist. And
Mm-hmm.
in it, it goes on about like fatty foods, like avoid cheese and butter. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So there's this narrative
Yep.
that has kept us away from those foods. And I'll just share this. Like my aunt has lost like 30 pounds and she's eating butter and stuff. And there's other reasons why she's lost the weight, but she's like, I could have ate butter my whole life, but I
Right.
avoided it because high cholesterol, it's
Uh-huh.
the like root of all evil. And so,
Right.
yeah, what comes forward for you around that? And what is
Yeah.
your take on red meat,
Yeah.
butter?
I'm all about it. I eat it like all day. I I think like something that you just said, it's like that's the simplicity of like our bodies want butter. Everyone loves butter. What if we just trusted that there was a reason for that? Like what if it was that simple? We've gotten so far from that where it's like if that's what you want to eat, how could that be so bad for you? Um but yeah, I think, our parents' generation, like the whole cholesterol scare with I always forget, I think it was Eisenhower, whatever president had the did I say Eisenhower? Eisenhower? Whatever president had the heart attack. It was like Americans, there was heart attacks were not a thing. One of the presidents had a heart attack, and that started this whole saturated fat cholesterol craze. And it was also, post World War II, where like all these margarine, all these products, all these processed foods were like the new hip great thing. So, yeah, I would say like our parents' generation, especially the women, got like the real short end of the stick on that, where it's super low fat diets. Cholesterol is so important. Our body will create cholesterol if we're not getting enough from our diet. Cholesterol is required for conversion of sex hormones in the body. So, like, if people have high levels of cholesterol, I'm going to want to know what's going on with your thyroid function, what's going on with your adrenal function, because to me, that's just showing that your thyroid's not able to convert properly. It's not a matter how could animals that we have eaten for tens of thousands of years be so problematic? Like that just makes zero sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, I think with red meat, it's like, okay, if you don't, yeah, beef is like a fattier cut. There's a lot of a whole ethical conversation we can have on how we source our meats, especially beef. Branch out, get some venison, get some elk, get some
Yeah.
boar, like we also have become so like chicken and beef. Like
Yeah.
that's not, we need a diverse diet. We get each animal has its own nutrient profile, but there is nothing that can replace the the bioavailability of the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals that are in a 4-ounce steak or
Yeah.
like animal protein, like it is talk about the interrelationships of minerals. Like that is Mother Nature's designed bioavailable like
Yeah.
food for us, like
Yeah.
how are we arguing that?
Yeah. And I think, when you spoke to the ethical position or, yeah, of meat, I think it's going back to more ancestral ways of knowing your farmer, getting
Mm-hmm.
grass fed where the animals treated really well, even maybe making your own butter. I haven't given that a go
Mm-hmm.
yet, but it's like when
Mm-hmm.
you think about butter and then this margarine
Mm-hmm.
that was created, like one's a whole food and one is really not a whole food.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at where the state of our health is, it feels like that pull to really return to
Yes.
that. Even
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to fruit and vegetables, like, growing your own, like getting away from the grocery stores
Yeah.
is kind of my take on
Yeah.
sovereignty,
Yeah. 100%.
at this time. Dairy, that's one that I've kind of struggled with. I think I have a psychological block
Yeah.
that dairy's gross and not good for me.
Mm.
Do
Mm.
you recommend like milk, like from the grocery store,
Mm.
or is it maybe raw milk?
Yeah, I mean, raw milk, I definitely recommend dairy and raw. I mean, that I will say I I ate a ton of dairy as a kid, not good dairy, but like not good quality dairy, but I ate a ton of it and then stopped. I couldn't digest it. I actually developed like intolerance to it where it would go right through me for years. Um, and, you know, was also kind of in the like plant-based, you know, cashew milk, like blah, 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 all these
Yeah.
processed dairy replacements. Um, but, you know, since incorporating raw milk into my life, butter into my life, raw cheese, yogurt,
Mm.
like I eat a ton of dairy. And um again, sourcing is important. We want good quality dairy. Well, we want to know ideally what the cows or the goats or the sheep are eating.
Yeah.
Um but it is, especially raw milk, it is so healing for us. I mean, it is incredible the amount of enzymes that are in milk. You know, it's an interesting conundrum where like I'm like, would I recommend if someone doesn't have access to raw milk? Just as an aside, there's a resource called realmilk.com where you can find farms near you that will sell raw milk, or herd shares where you can buy raw milk.
Okay.
So that's a resource. But yeah,
Even
if
in countries where it's completely illegal, like Canada.
it's by the Weston A. Price Foundation. I'm not sure on that, but there, I mean, there are states in the U.S. where it's not legal, and there are ways around that with herd shares where you become a member of a farm, and there are different laws with that. So I'm not 100% sure on if it's active in Canada, but check it out. I wouldn't. I mean, Weston A. Price is a pretty big organization, so but if not, then I would maybe start poking around to herd shares in Canada, because I know that that tends to be a workaround for people.
Okay.
That being said, if you're not able to find raw milk, organic milk at the store, A2 organic milk would be my next best recommendation. And I still think it's supportive. I think also, you know, there's a whole a very deep story around dairy, estrogen. You know, it can cause acne flares, or you know, there's a lot of, it's a common recommendation if you have estrogen related issues to stop doing dairy.
Right.
And I kind of think that's another one of those like myths that gets perpetuated that doesn't focus on the root cause. Like the dairy is not causing you acne. Again, why would hundreds of years ago when we lived on a farm with like our goat and our cow and ate the, you know, like our body is able to digest dairy. Like it's not,
Yeah.
you know, why would that all of a sudden be like this poison to us? And you know, dairy is the only, it has equal amount of protein, carb, and fat. It has all the macronutrient profiles. It's a superfood.
Mm.
Let alone all the enzymes that are in it. And then, you know, we get in yogurt, we have probiotics. Like there's so many benefits from dairy. And I will just say on like an intuitive, like women, like being in a women's body, I feel fertile AF and like juicy. Like I was part of a raw goat milk herd share this year where my friend had 5 goats, and like I would get a quart of raw goat milk every week. And like I felt so juicy. Like I don't really know how to describe it besides that. I just felt like my body was like, yeah, like yum. um and so yeah, if people are kind of scared of dairy because it makes acne flares or all these things, it's like, what's the underlying imbalance
Yeah.
there?
I'm like in a beam of light
Yeah,
right
I
now.
see that.
Are does mineral deficiency contribute to acne in any
Hmm.
way?
Yeah. So, kind of what I was saying before about copper being connected to estrogen. So, if we have any sort of estrogen dominant symptoms, acne, breast tenderness before we bleed, you know, emotionality, like over emotionality, fungal stuff also, it's related to copper imbalance in the body. And so, usually, what we actually need to do is kind of eliminate that bio unavailable copper, make sure we have enough bioavailable copper. And that will bring the hormonal system into balance over time.
Okay. Is it magnesium and copper that are linked together? I know there's a supplement that you take and you have to make sure that you're taking copper as well. Is that magnesium or is it like K2?
Zinc.
Zinc.
Zinc and
Yes.
copper have a relationship. Yeah. I mean, copper
Yeah.
has a lot of relationships, but yeah, probably zinc.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So get your dairy, get your butter, get your meat.
Enjoy your freaking food.
Yeah. I remember one of my friends asked me because I was vegan for 6.5 years. He's like, what did
Mm.
it taste like when you had a steak? I was like, so good. Like, how did I miss
Yes.
that for so much of my, life and the damage that it
Mm-hmm.
did as
Mm-hmm.
well?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which in the yoga world, probably in the plant medicine world as well, plant-based diets are really encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
And there can be a lot of harm.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I will say like also in like the indigenous communities in which I've sat with plant medicines, like mostly in Peru, they eat meat after ceremony. They just don't eat it
Mm.
before. Like they also they're not like on constant dieta. That's kind of a Western approach where it's like when I like ate a limited diet beforehand, some specific plants that you work with require you to carry an ongoing dieta, like no pork or something. But like in general, indigenous cultures that I've sat with totally replenish, and you know they're not vegan in Peru. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't exist, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. With that meme, maybe you need a steak instead of another plant medicine ceremony.
Yeah.
What was your underlying message with that? Or I mean, it could be just an obvious message.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just it kind of speaks to what I've witnessed. I mean, what I went through, and also what I've witnessed in many people around me that really highly prioritize more of a spiritual healing approach, but are so actually ungrounded. And when we don't have the cellular foundations to hold that spiritual healing work, we just continue to deplete ourselves. And I've witnessed and experienced, this really intense, uh, almost obsessive cycle with healing. Like when in that kind of spiritual healing approach, where it's like I go to ceremony, I feel uplifted for a couple weeks. So, I have all this clarity. I feel inspired. I get the guidance, and then actually I'm more depleted. So after the kind of high wears off, I start to feel depressed again. And then I start to think I need another ceremony. And it like, same thing with microdosing, it's like this constant like hamster wheel of I need to heal something. Something is wrong with me. I need to do better. I need to be better. Which again, like self-development in itself is not a bad thing, but I feel like we've just taken it a little too far. And like as I've focused on replenishing my cellular health and my foundational health, I am much, much more content in my life. My capacity to handle multiple stresses, like I'm moving to a new state right now, and I'm launching a new program, and I'm whatever else I'm like, it's like I'm doing a lot,
Yeah.
and I'm in awe of myself. And I'm also like staying pretty even keeled amidst this. And that to me is true health. Like, can we be content where we are? Can we find joy in the everyday? Are we like being on that constant striving hamster wheel? I think is really depleting over time.
Yeah. Like the next ceremony, the next ceremony, the next
Yeah.
breath work journey, whatever it is.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
constant. And that's
Yes.
really powerful. But like, are you grounded and in your body? Like, is your vessel healthy enough to
Mm-hmm.
anchor in all this healing that you're doing? Because when your health goes, mental or physical health, you've got nothing,
No,
you
you
know,
don't. Yeah.
you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's It's pretty important. Do you want to speak to the relationship and stress and how that
Mm.
interwove with your
Yeah,
journey?
totally. So, yeah, I think it's a really important thing to talk about because, I don't want people to hear my story and be like, "Oh, cool, she just like fed herself good food and took supplements." Like, yes, those are hugely impactful. And especially with something like histamine intolerance, that was like my body communicating that it didn't feel safe. It was hyper reactive. And looking back, it's like it's almost like, how people say that uh like when women are on birth control, they're attracted to different men than when they're off birth control. It's almost like that's kind of like me, like pre mineral balancing and nourishing myself, and post. Like the person that I was with, I love him. He's a good person. But I was a kind of microdosing cacao festival fairy at the time, like I was in a very different frequency. I was not grounded. And um, over time, my body just didn't feel safe in the relationship for a variety of reasons. And as I wasn't really willing to listen to that, or it took me time to kind of get the message, then I eventually started to develop really intense symptoms. And it's all part of it. It was the relationship and my malnourishment and my, lack of minerals. Like they're all part of it. But it wasn't until I ended that relationship and moved out of our house and like reclaimed my life that I was really able to heal. Because whether it's a relationship or a moldy house or a job, if we are in if we have an external stressor like that is impacting us day in and day out, it's going to be impossible to heal, because stress is the most, like, when we are stressed, we'll lose minerals. Like that's our body's response to stress, is we'll excrete a bunch of magnesium, we'll excrete a bunch of calcium, all our ratios will start to become imbalanced, and there's a huge mineral cascade. And so, who I am today, it's like I wouldn't even choose that relationship. Who I am today, I'm much more clear and grounded in myself, and I'm in it. I'm older. I want different things. Like there's a lot that's shifted, but um, it's kind of like trippy to look back and be like, wow, like I can't really even like understand how I got so deep in with that person.
That's interesting. And our nervous systems can be wired for different things, like safety with certain
Mm-hmm.
people or unsafety with certain
Mm-hmm.
people. And
Mm-hmm.
when that's changed, whether that person is removed or something happens, we can really notice healing that's gone
Mm-hmm.
on in
Yeah.
our
Yeah. We
body.
have to feel safe. We have to feel safe. Like, and
Yeah.
sometimes we don't feel safe because we're not nourished and our cells are kind of like screaming. They're like, if you're hangry all the time, like your body doesn't feel safe. Like you need food.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
can be kind of physiological, like cellular, like fuel based unsafety. And then there's also like environmental, and it's all important. And we'll see that too, like the calcium magnesium ratio, when it gets really out of balance, it's called a lifestyle stressor or a spiritual defensiveness pattern. Like we can see, and mine was really out of balance when I was in that relationship. Like we can see, like, hey, there's something going on in your life that's not in alignment for you.
Mm,
And
yeah.
it's wild. It's accurate.
Yeah. It's almost like when we're deficient in these minerals or we're completely out of our body, we're not safe in our body.
Mm-hmm.
Our body's kind of like, it's not safe for us here. And so then how can we be fully safe with someone else if we're not fully safe
Yeah,
in our own body?
100%. Mm-hmm.
So you named the symptom of like if you're hangry all the
Mm-hmm.
time, that can be a symptom. Are there any other like really obvious symptoms out there that might be like you're deficient?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at it from a metabolism perspective. So, are you always cold? Do you have a low body temperature? Are you losing hair? Have you noticed your hair has lost luster? Are your PMS symptoms bad? Do you have, like, we shouldn't, like, PMS is not necessarily a normal experience. If we have insane cramps or, um, debilitating like fatigue or mood shifts in big ways, like those are all signs that something is out of balance. Are you sleeping well? Are you digesting well? Do you have a libido? That's a really big one. It's kind of like this foundational, just like, are you a well functioning vessel? And it's really common to have issues these days. It's super normal. And, I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, like I have, I'm not super balanced. Like most people aren't. And there are many reasons for that. And that's, totally okay. And it's like, um, I guess I just feel grateful that I found this approach because it feels sustainable, and accessible, and I really believe in it. But yeah, it's a very common experience to, just have some diminished vitality right now.
Yeah. I think that's important. I've struggled a lot with my mental health over the past year, and
Mm.
there is shame that comes along with it. Like, why can't I
Oh yeah.
just handle the world, or, whatever it might be? But it's like, we're literally swimming upstream
Mm-hmm.
right now.
Mm-hmm.
There is like a blanket of things that are cast on us that are
Yeah.
completely out of our control, like a
Yeah.
cloak. That's
Mm-hmm.
and and so we're
Yeah.
going against that. Like we're living in a toxic
Yeah.
world, um,
Yes.
and
It's
so we're
distorted
doing the
and
best we
reversed.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so having grace for yourself and compassion, and knowing there's nothing wrong with you if you've got
Yeah.
no libido, or there just
Absolutely.
might be something that's a little out of whack.
Yeah, your
And
body is just communicating something.
yeah, yeah,
That's it.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that I haven't touched on that you want to add to this conversation? I feel like we really dove in there, but it went by quickly.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. I don't have anything popping up.
Nothing like, ooh. Do you want to share your offerings that you put out into the world, and how you work with people doing
Yeah,
this?
absolutely. So, I recently launched my kind of signature group offering for women. It's called Radiantly Nourished, and it's a 12-month mineral balancing membership that starts in January of 2024. And so, this approach is it's most effective as a long-term approach. It's not just a one-off consultation, a one-off test. I like to, and it's recommended that we retest every 3 months to see how your protocol is actually working, to see what's shifting, to see, are you eliminating a ton of metals right now, and can we support your liver and detox systems even more to support your body. And so I do offer one-on-one consultations, but I found that I wanted to create like a container where women can go through this together, where we're all on the same cadence. So in the program, each person gets 3 individual consults with me and HTMA tests. So there's a one-on-one component, and then we have 12 group calls through every month throughout the year. And there's an online forum. So there's this like community, there's connection, there's like a place to be like, hey, I feel like shit. I don't believe that this is working. I'm having doubts. I want to stop. I don't, whatever, like all the things that come up when, you commit to a program and you're having a hard time, you have a healing reaction. I want a place where we can support people to stay steady and stay strong. And then we get a continued like cadence of retests and updated protocols, so that people can really. I want women to commit to a slower approach with health. I have this post I want to put out about slow health. Like, think about like the slow food movement, where it's like cooking things from scratch, growing things from the garden, using traditional cooking methods to get the most nutrients out of something. It's like, that's we can't just do a 3-month protocol or a restrictive diet and heal like years and years of imbalances in our body. I believe it needs to be a slower, steady, titrated thing. Like you don't have to if you don't put everything in place in the protocol that I recommend to you in 3 months, like that's okay. You might need 6 months to really like work up to trying to eat 100 grams of protein a day or to incorporate other practices into your life. And so that's a lot about that program, but I'm really passionate about it because I think, especially for women, it's going to be a really powerful and effective way to do this work. And then I also do, one-off consultations for men or anyone else that's not interested in the program.
I think that's important because we've kind of been conditioned to want quick fixes or things to happen instantly.
Yeah.
Instant gratification and whatever it might be, anything. It's taken us a long time to get to that place. If it's like illness or anxiety, it's taken a long time, and it's going to take time to, untangle that where you can come into a place of peace. And what would you say if somebody struggles with anxiety? What mineral deficiency would that be, or is that the same as fear?
It can be related to copper toxicity. It can also, in my opinion, be just not eating enough food, not eating enough protein, honestly.
Oh, okay.
It could be related to a lot of other like imbalance. Not enough magnesium, for example, or calcium, the calming minerals. But yeah, typically it could be like the first thing I would go to is probably copper.
Okay, beautiful. What's been your biggest lesson along the way?
Everything is an experiment. Like I'm making this big life change, moving states, and any decision, anything I do in my business, anything if I'm scared to do something, I'm just anchoring to like, this is an experiment. It's not forever. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't know what's going to happen. Why don't I just give it a try? It kind of removes the pressure. And that was also kind of my approach to health and like to healing and to finding this work, and then really, feeling the benefits and the effectiveness of it. So
yeah. I love that. It's like it all is kind of an experiment because we really don't even know why we're here. So
totally, like have some fun with it.
Give it a try.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. Where can everybody find you?
Yeah, Instagram, SENA 2_ Maria, Sena Maria, and my website, sena-maria.com.
Okay, beautiful. And it'll be in the show notes where everybody can reach out to you. Well, thank you. I learned a ton in this conversation. So thank you for being on the show, love.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast. Please like, share, download, subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next week for another episode on the Phoenix Rising podcast. Sending so much love.